Yes, Mr. Gopal, that you learned a former oath.
Yes, my lord.
Yes, Mr. Pardon?
As the court pleases. Mr. Gopal, before lunch, we were looking at the evidence of Lieutenant Taylor in the first inquest. And I just want to put one last passage from his evidence to you before moving over to Captain du Toit. So we're on page 137, my lord.
Sorry.
Please help the witness. Volume A, page 137.
Yes, my lord.
So halfway down the page, I'll just read the extract. Mr. Cooper asks, who took the deceased to the cell? And Taylor responds, the European constable on duty, not Nordia, another one. And the bounty constable, Captain du Toit, and myself. And I think virtually all our members present took the deceased down to the cells. The other members were on their way to their vehicles, parked at the back near the cells, so they walked with us. At the cells, Captain and du Toit and myself entered the cell. The constable and the bounty constable were present. Captain and myself entered the cell and made a search. So according to that extract from the evidence of Lieutenant Taylor, you only accompanied the deceased, Dr. Haffejee, out of the charge office, down into the car park, and it appears you then, according to Taylor, left for your vehicle, and it was only Taylor and du Toit and the two constables who actually entered the cell. Your response to that?
My lord, that is a lie.
You're saying that you went all the way into the cell yourself?
Yeah, but Dr. Haffejee had not passed on. He was alive when he was put into the cell.
Yes, that wasn't the question. The question is, on your version, you accompanied Dr. Haffejee all the way into the cell with Captain du Toit and Lieutenant Taylor.
I accompanied Dr. Haffejee together with Taylor, du Toit, Shrewd. And Dr. Haffejee was alive when put into the cell.
So all the way into the cell, you didn't then, before Taylor and du Toit and the constables, you didn't go to your car, you were with them all the way to the cell?
I was with them all the way to the cell, yes.
Okay, then let's turn to the evidence of Captain du Toit. Lord, that is also...
What page would that be, sir?
Volume A, page 182. And I'll just read the extract. It's about halfway down the page, perhaps more than halfway.
Yes.
The questions by Mr. Cooper are put in English, and Captain du Toit responds in Afrikaans. So apart from Lieutenant Taylor, who are the members of the security police who accompanied the deceased to the cell? Soos ek reeds gesê het, maar die celle toe het ons omtrent almal saam afgestap. But who were they? Ander was Lieutenant McPherson, Lieutenant Winsemi, en ek dink Constable Gopal, en natuurlijk myself and Lieutenant Taylor. So 5 security policemen, is that correct, accompanied the deceased to what turned out to be the death cell? Then he says in Afrikaans, nee, dit is nie die kwessie dat ons die oorledende vergesel het na die celle toe. As ek mag verduidelik, daar was besluit gewees om die oorledende aan te hou. Luitenant Taylor en myself het die man ondervra tot omtrent daardie stadium. You can see that Captain du Toit is saying that that last period of interrogation was just him and Lieutenant Taylor. He goes on to say in Afrikaans, die ander lede, 3 lede, het ek uitgehad om 'n ander ondersoek in dieselfde verband en hulle het teruggekeer na Brattenstrand Polisiestasie min of meer die tyd toe ons die man na die aanklagkantoor genaam het. Dit is die oorledende. Ons was op die punt om uit te gaan, met ander woorde om te gaan slaap, om huis toe te gaan. And he's essentially saying that it's at that point that yourself and your colleagues returned back. And Mr. Cooper says, so was it just a coincidence that apart from Lieutenant Taylor and yourself, there were also the other 3 security policemen who took the deceased to the cell? A coincidence? And du Toit responds, dit is so. He provides a little bit of elaboration. He says, well, he's asked, was it just a coincidence that they happened to be at the station at the cell? And he says, in Afrikaans, nee. Ek het hulle heel wat vroeër, net voordat ons die ondervraging, and I can't see what that sentence says, maybe my junior can assist. Verstak. Het ook hulle versoek om terug te kom. Daar was sektor van die ondersoek wat hulle moes gedoen het, wat hulle wou verneem het. Met ander woorde, ek het hulle ontbied soontoe. So, roughly translated, he's saying that at a certain point in time during the interrogation, the Indian members were sent off to do some investigation connected to the Haffejee case, and that towards the end of that night, the interrogation, you were called back to the station. Your response?
No, my lord, that is a lie. The first part that you read in Afrikaans as well, I'm not too clued up with Afrikaans, so if it's possible, if you could translate that into English and tell me everything that you read out in Afrikaans, sir.
Well, to sum it up, he's basically saying that in totality, at a certain point, although the time is unclear, but presumably would have been after the alleged Durban Bay incident, which you've already testified didn't happen. But according to Taylor, we know that was in the middle of that night, around 9:30 or so. So presumably after that time, the allegation is that du Toit sent yourself and the other 2 members on some investigation connected to the Haffejee case, and you were then summoned back, and you happened to arrive back at the very moment that Dr. Haffejee was being escorted to the charge office from the interrogation room.
No, my lord, that is a lie, a blatant lie.
But you can also see that du Toit is being quite careful to place you and your colleagues out of the interrogation room.
Yes.
In the last few hours.
Just as what Jimmy Taylor had also, correct me if I'm wrong, said so earlier.
Exactly.
Yes.
So in your view, did you think they must have gotten together to work
They
out
must have
that evidence?
colluded, yeah, because the 2 testimonies cannot be like exactly the same if they did not collude. They must have colluded.
The big question, of course, is why they would want to place the 2 of you out of the interrogation room at that point in time. And if we just go back a page, at the top of page 182, I'm not going to read it out to save time, but basically he says that it was only, and my lord, this is at about line 10 on page 182, as far as he recalls, it was Lieutenant Taylor and himself, together with the uniformed members of the charge office, who actually entered the cell. But he says you were not, he's implying that you were simply not there in the cell itself. So again, both Taylor and Dutoy are only placing themselves in the cell together with the two constables, and the other security branch members were not present on their version.
That is a total lie, my lord.
There was an interesting statement that Mr. Cooper put to Dutoy, and my lord, on pages 191 and 192 of volume A. It'll take too much time to deal with this evidence, so I'm simply going to summarize it. Mr. Cooper had been putting certain assertions to Captain Dutoy that given all the injuries on the deceased, questions would be raised at the inquest. And he'd also pointed out that the previous year there had been lots of adverse publicity surrounding the case of Joseph Mbluli.
Yes, my lord.
Which he suggested that the police wanted to avoid in this case.
Okay. And at halfway down page 192, he puts the following to Captain Dutoy: "And dead men tell no tales." Well, sorry, I'm trying to get to that point.
So that's, in the old record it's page 171, and on the paginated record it's page 192.
I've gotten that page.
About halfway down. This is one line, and the statement is, Mr. Cooper puts it to Dutoy: "And dead men tell no tales." Do you see that?
So Dr. Cooper says, you accept that dead men tell no tales.
Well, in the record that I'm looking at, he simply says, "And dead men tell no tales," and the response of Captain Dutoy is, "Ik weet nie."
Okay, what I've got over here is by Dr. Cooper. It's a question. Next sentence, you accept that dead men tell no tales. And then by the presiding officer, it says, I think that is the universal experience.
Yes, that follows the evidence, but if you just go one or two lines above,
yes,
there is that statement.
Okay.
And the presiding officer wants to know if it's a rhetorical question or not.
Okay.
Dr. Cooper says it is a question. You accept that dead men tell no tales.
Okay.
The presiding officer says, I think that is the universal experience.
Yes.
So perhaps there's a truism in the statement that had been put to Captain Dutoy, that dead men tell no tales. And Mr. Gopal, perhaps that's why Dr. Haffejee was disposed of. That's why he was killed in detention, so that he could tell no tales.
I would agree with you, my lord.
So, if you agree with me, are you suggesting that he was murdered in detention?
Understandably, dead men tell no tales, and for him to, murdered most likely. I cannot believe that he had committed suicide, because too weak to spin around like that. Impossible. I cannot believe that.
So in your view, given his particular condition,
Yes.
he was in no position to crouch or roll around in order to strangle himself.
With the type of beating that he had received, my Lord, it'd be impossible. I can't see any human being having the slightest strength to even bend his body or turn around, etc. He was, for one, he was very, very thin. And to be beaten like that, and then for him to try to commit suicide, that's something I cannot buy.
And you also mentioned in your evidence in chief that you doubt he committed suicide because he was psychologically strong.
Yes.
And why did you say that?
Because, for one, he had not broken down psychologically and told us whatever we wanted to know. And secondly, although being weak, he was still psychologically strong, because I do not believe that he could have hung himself. I still believe that he was psychologically strong. Because remember that from the morning till just before midnight, he was beaten. I think about an hour or so break he had, but that's it. Other than that, he was beaten to shreds, if I can use those words. And not to break down after all that beating, he's got to be psychologically strong. I can understand that the command from the ANC High Command that within the first 24 hours do not talk. Between 24 to 48 hours you may talk. I can understand that. And Dr. Haffejee did not talk, besides his family stuff that he had opened up on.
So from his perspective, he had done his duty at least for the first 24 hours.
Yes. Yes, my Lord.
You know, given what he knew from his training in India and London, it would have been completely understandable if thereafter he did break. So difficult to put ourselves into his shoes, but given the instruction from the High Command,
yes,
it wouldn't be held against him.
Between 24 to 48 hours, you may talk, but whatever you say, it could just be slow, drag.
To drag it out. Now, let's just assume for the moment, and again we have to hypothesize here.
Sure.
Let's assume that he did want to commit suicide.
Okay.
And that, given that he was able to walk, even if it was slowly, if he was able to walk, then logic dictates that he could have easily stood in the cell. Correct? A person who walks obviously is in a position to stand.
Possible.
Not possible.
Yeah.
You can't walk if you can't stand.
Because now I'm just thinking, a person beaten like that, lying down in a cell to try and get up, I don't know. But yes, I mean, if you say that if he can walk, then he can stand, because obviously you've got to stand to walk.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, if he was able to walk from one side of the building to another,
Yes.
he stood in the charge office. I assume
Yes.
he wasn't sitting down.
Yes.
Then he walked downstairs to the cell. I think one can accept if he was able to do that.
Yes.
Then he could stand.
Yes.
And if he did want to commit suicide, doing so in the position which he was found makes no sense whatsoever, because he could have slung the ligature from the highest rung and simply turned around while standing to strangle himself.
Absolutely.
And if he wanted to actually hang himself, you at the inspection at Loco, you saw cell number 2.
Yes.
And you noticed that there were 2 windows covered with a grill each,
Yes.
and that there were holes at the bottom.
Yes.
You could easily have slung the ligature through those holes and hung himself.
Yes.
And in fact, as was pointed out to us by Brigadier Merring, who demonstrated it, he could have stood on the toilet bowl and easily hung himself from the grill on the window above the toilet.
Sure.
Yes. And would you also agree that in the position that he was found, if it was a staged suicide, from the perspective of those doing the staging, that's the easiest staging to execute, because you don't have to hold the body up in a higher position, which is considerable effort. It's much easier if you simply tie the person to the lowest rung when he's already lying on the ground.
That, as well as wearing a long sleeve shirt. That's what I've seen?
Well, yes, you've already indicated that,
yes.
That he wasn't wearing that shirt. For the moment, we can't take that any further. If I can take you back to the evidence, your evidence in chief, as well as your statement. At page 63, you say, sorry, paragraph 63, page 1749, we all accompanied him to the cell where I saw him enter. Taylor told him to relax and think about what to say, and that we would return in the morning. And this is what I want to put to you. I tried to caution Haffejee, told him that the interrogators would be back in 2 hours' time, just so that he would talk to stop the vicious beating on him. In reality, I knew we were done for the day, but simply said that to allow him time to jog his memory to speak the truth.
Yes.
So if you knew that you were only returning in the morning,
yes,
and you weren't coming back in 2 hours,
yes,
why on earth did you say that to him? Why did you think that would help him jog his memory?
Well, you know, when a suspect like him being beaten like how he was beaten, to psychologically make him think very carefully, to come out with the truth, right, and to avoid any further beating.
Yes, but the question, I'm not saying that, but the
I'm
question
trying to
is
answer your question.
Why in 2 hours and why not the morning? Why don't you simply say, we'll be back in the morning, and if you want to avoid a further beating, you must tell the truth?
Yeah, but
what's the 2 hours got to do with that?
Absolutely, I'm trying to answer your question, my lord.
Sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned the 2 hour, that we're back in 2 hours' time, just to jog his memory. And the reason why I use 2 hours, because then it's a short time, because it's like just after midnight he's put into a cell. He's got a very short limit of time to think very quickly, to come out with the truth, so that the next morning when he's been questioned, he had already jogged his memory, and then he can tell us.
Well, I have to say that doesn't make any sense to me. I simply don't see the connection of saying to him, well, we're back in 2 hours, so you better get ready. If anything, that places him under considerably more stress and pressure, because he knows he's not going to be getting any sleep if you're back in 2 hours.
My lord, that's exactly what I said. I'm not going to deny it, because I said that, and that's what I meant, to jog his memory in that short space of time. My lord, also please understand that when I was making this affidavit with Advocate Shabnam Singh, if I wanted to lie, I could have lied, but I did not lie. And I put that over there because that is the truth. That is the truth. Not with any sort of intention that, oh, I'm going to come back in 2 hours' time and then you'll be killed. No ways, not at all. The fact of the matter is that I said that, and therefore I put it in my statement. And Advocate Shabnam Singh had even questioned me about that. And that is the truth, to jog his memory.
So if we cannot turn to what took place in the morning, and you've already mentioned, you've already given an account in your evidence in chief. So you say you You met Taylor on the landing between the 4th and the 5th floor
Yes.
of Hoosen Building and Fisher Street. And in your evidence in chief, you said to Taylor, well, let's get back to the interrogation. And it was put to you, you were eager to get back. And you responded, yes, you were eager to get back.
Sure.
You said you wanted to get information out of him in relation to the making of chemical bombs and the quantities and the like. Now that response suggests to me that you were part and parcel of the interrogation. You weren't just there to take him to the toilet and prevent him from escaping.
Yes, but when I was asked that question, I did not deny it. I admitted to that.
Right.
Yes.
And then you also say that if he confirms it true and correct, if he admits to making the bombs, then you have a case. And you said the problem was there was nothing to compare with what we had on the recording. What did you mean by nothing to compare with what we had on the recording?
Because Dr. Haffejee had not told us anything like what we had on the recording.
Right, but actually, you had a girlfriend who was saying this man is involved in making bombs.
Yes.
You had audio recordings of him instructing people how to make bombs, allegedly.
Yes.
You had notes which, if the first inquest record is to be believed, were highly incriminating.
Yes.
And you have, I believe it was Taylor in his evidence, said that he accepted that those were his notes.
I don't know if he accepted that those were his notes. It's the first time I'm hearing this, my lord.
Well, we'll find the reference, but somewhat earlier in the evidence of Taylor, it might have been Detroit, but we'll certainly put that up in due course. The deceased was asked, were these his handwritten notes? And it was either Taylor or Detroit who said that the deceased said yes, they were. Although he wouldn't answer questions, he wouldn't admit anything, but he accepted they were his notes.
That's a lie, my lord.
So we will be making submissions to this honourable court in argument that where you have audio recordings of somebody saying they will either plant bombs or they're teaching people how to make bombs, clearly an offence. It wasn't that difficult to get those recordings to be admissible in a case against him. One simply had to prove that the recordings were original in nature, that they hadn't been interfered with. You have to prove who the identity of the speaker is, show that the recordings were sufficiently intelligible. Only on the question of how accurate the content of the recordings are, what was being said, would it help to have additional evidence. But certainly in terms of admissibility, that was not an impossible thing to do. And similarly, in relation to documentary evidence, one simply has to prove that the document in question was made by the person who is purported to have made it. We won't go into all the legal issues at this point in time, but the point I wish to make to you is that you had somebody on the inside. You had tape recordings of him dealing with bombs. and you had handwritten notes which were described as highly incriminating. Evidence was also led by a handwriting expert in the first inquest that it was Haffejee's handwriting.
Okay.
And yet you felt the need to extract a confession out of him.
Well, sorry, may I
Please.
talk? Yes. My Lord, the recordings say one thing. And to really seal the case, so to speak, should Dr. Haffejee confirm that, then we can say we've got a case. But up to that point in time, despite the documentary evidence, despite the call recordings, tomato recordings, which by the way are not legitimate, because you just can't walk into somebody's premises and put in a tomato in the ceiling. You've got to apply. There's a process that has to be done to make it legit.
But presumably that process was carried out by the security branch officers.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Because
so
if that was...
there was no paperwork involved in tapping his phone and putting the tomato in?
Not to my knowledge, because the file which was being compiled would have had some sort of documentation over there to show that an application has been made by the branch to the post office to have his his lines to be intercepted. Application has been made to Pretoria to have a tomato to be installed, and that application has been approved, etc., etc. And then who did the installation, their details would be there, etc. But there was nothing of that sort.
My Lord, the reference for Lieutenant Taylor's evidence, in which he alleges that Haffejee accepted that the handwritten documents were made by him, is at volume A3, page 125, line 10.
Yeah.
So, after you were told that Dr. Haffejee had allegedly committed suicide, you were then told or rather, you met a Munsemi, Lieutenant Munsemi, and you asked him what happened, and he put his finger to his lips and said, shh. You could not understand what had happened, and you had a bad feeling that Munsemi knew what had happened but did not want to tell you. Why did you think that Munsemi knew what happened but wouldn't tell you?
Because my Lord, because of the manner in which he had responded to what I had said. I mean, shh. I mean, that's very suspicious.
And then you tried to ask Governor, and the Governor told you to keep quiet because Du Toit had told everyone to keep quiet. So, if in fact Haffejee had simply committed suicide,
Yes.
then there wouldn't really be any reason to keep quiet, would there?
No, well, there wouldn't be any reason for Major Ben to tell me, shh, keep quiet. There would be no reason. I mean, had he really committed suicide, because after that, all the other stories that we had to go through with regards to recordings and, in other words, the tape recordings of what we must say, etc., etc., Durban Bay, why all the falsities, why all the lies, for what? He committed suicide.
If I can draw your attention to paragraph 67 of your affidavit. That's page 1751. There you point out that when Haffejee was detained in a cell, his face did not appear to have obvious injuries because Taylor had wiped his face. Earlier in your evidence, you mentioned that Taylor had wiped some blood from the face of
from
Dr.
the side
Haffejee
lip,
as he
from the
was
bottom lip, yes.
being taken to the charge office.
Yes.
And do you recall what Taylor used to wipe the blood off his face?
I think either a towel or a piece of cloth.
Did you mention a handkerchief?
Handkerchief, yeah.
So,
yeah.
If it was a handkerchief, do you recall whose handkerchief it was?
No idea. No idea, my lord.
Right. You're aware that a handkerchief was used to tighten the trouser legs around the grill of the cell?
That's what I've been learning from the time of the inspection in loco.
Right. All right, I want to put to you some of the passages from the forensic report of Dr. Naidu, because I think we have to specifically test the forensic evidence against your version. My Lord, I'm looking at Dr. Naidu's report, which is G24, and I'm looking at the section dealing with time of death.
Page?
Page 1585. And it goes over to the next page, 1586, that's page 11 of his report. So, Dr. Naidu, at paragraph C, says the inquest record accepted that Constables Nordia and Madlala saw the deceased alive at 3 a.m. and at 4 a.m. were seen dead. This evidence is seriously doubted and requires to be challenged. And it's in Annex B, my Lord, that Dr. Naidu deals with, Annex A, where he deals with time of death. I'm not going to revisit all his analysis, but I'll put to one paragraph to a few passages. Using the method of temperature readings, his calculation is that Dr. Haffejee died between 10:20 p.m. and 11:20 p.m. the night before, approximately. But the more accurate assessment is not that of temperature. In fact, Dr. Naidu says in that paragraph that that method has a wide variability and is unreliable. But in relation to rigor mortis, he says that the state of full development of rigor mortis indicates a useful impression of time of death. And he quotes Professor Gordon from the post-mortem report saying that rigor mortis had developed completely and was fully developed in all of the joints he described. And since complete rigidity happens between 6 to 10 hours after the death, this means at 8 hours, according to a certain author, would be the mean post-mortem interval. And so he says this would translate to death at between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. that night. In the meantime, putting it before midnight. Now this conflicts with the police version that he was alive at 3 a.m. in the morning and only found dead at 4 a.m. It also puts your version into some difficulty, Mr. Gopal, because if one accepts the mean time of death as before midnight, that then conflicts with your version, because on your version, certainly at midnight, he was alive.
Yes.
To be fair to you, though, there is a period between midnight and 1 a.m. if one takes the outer the outer limit of death. So there is a possibility that he could have passed away between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. on the version of the expert views of Dr. Naidu. So there is, we concede that on his view, there is certainly the possibility that he might have passed somewhat earlier, but after midnight.
Okay.
If I can then refer you to Dr. Naidu's discussion on some of the injuries. My Lord, that's page 1589, and I'm looking at paragraph 37 towards the bottom of the page. The injuries of the body surface and of the scalp, that's the head, chest, and mesentery, of the stomach area, abdomen, in particular, must be at risk of being a motive in this description, considered as having been due to significant forces and physically incapacitating, and that the deceased would have likely been in noticeable pain and in marked distress for the entire period after the injuries. If they were inflicted in stages, then the deceased condition would have been progressively worsened. And perhaps just to add to that, on the following page, page 1590, under the heading B, head, Dr. Naidu deals with what was referred to as deep scalp bruising, and he suggests that it was likely possible from several physical impacts that rendered the bruising as confluent, as merging together a set of hemorrhages, and the effects of such injury would have included either unconsciousness or a lowered state of consciousness or drowsiness. So there Dr. Naidu is raising the possibility that following these multiple blows to the head, he was rendered unconscious or a lower state of consciousness or drowsiness.
Okay.
Now, you've already testified that he wasn't unconscious, but is it possible that he was in a state of a lowered state of consciousness?
At what point in time, my Lord?
Well, we don't know, but presumably following the blows to his head.
And when you say lower form of consciousness,
It lowered state of consciousness or drowsiness, as seen with concussion.
I can't agree with that, my Lord.
So
I can't agree with that.
So you're saying that he wasn't drowsy or in a lowered state of unconsciousness?
No, my Lord. He was conscious. He could walk. Maybe he felt drowsy. I mean, with that type of beating, who would not feel drowsy? That's what I'm just thinking of now.
Yes, and at the bottom of that page, his description of the injuries on the chest, the contusions, the bruising. He says the heavy blow to the left lower front of the chest would have been intensely painful. Such blows would also cause the person to be winded, breathless, and doubled up in pain. Do you recall that happening?
Sure.
He says such a blow could have caused a cardiac concussion, and he says that could have even triggered sudden death by way of abnormal cardiac rhythm.
Well, he did not die at that point in time.
Yes. Well, Dr. Naidu is suggesting the possibility that those kinds of injuries could have caused him to die suddenly under interrogation.
Under interrogation, he did not die. That's one.
And then dealing with abdominal, that's the mesenteric area, he noticed this, what's called mesenteric extravasation. Lord, I'm on page 1591. Extravasation of blood indicates a bleeding or contusion. This can only occur with massive abdominal blows, possibly by a fist or a kick. This would have seriously incapacitated the deceased, and for some time thereafter would have been doubled up in pain, not just winded, had been unable to sit or stand up or walk upright, and might have restricted abdominal movements and respiration. But he goes on to say that that injury could have been potentially dangerous and even life-threatening had the spleen or liver been damaged. And he says it's surprising that the pathologist didn't describe any free blood staining. And he says it must be borne in mind that if there was no observable bleeding, death may have supervened very shortly after the abdominal impact. And this may actually suggest that the death may have been caused by the chest/abdominal impacts themselves.
Well, the point in time when he was being interrogated, he was standing, he wasn't dead. Maybe these injuries that, or like what Dr. Naidu is, the pathologist is saying, he's a pathologist, he's got scientific evidence. I can't contest that because I'm not a pathologist. However, what I can say is that if that type of injuries took place within the cell, when he was placed in a cell and thereafter, then certainly that type of reaction can take place.
Now, dealing with the paragraph in the same page titled General Effects of the Injuries, Dr. Naidu states, with regard to the injuries individually and together, the deceased could not reasonably have been found to be simply awake and normal when and if the cell was last visited for inspection at 0300 hours. For at that stage, he must have sustained all the observed injuries. Had such visit been undertaken by an objective inspector of his condition, he would have found an injured person in noteworthy pain and distress if he was still alive after these injuries, if not in a state of unconsciousness from the head injury or already deceased.
I hear you, my lord.
So Dr. Naidu is challenging the claim that at 3 a.m. he was alive and in a normal state. He goes on to say in the next paragraph, if it was whilst being interrogated in the office, as testified by Taylor and Dutoit, that the injuries were sustained and the deceased would probably have been unlikely to have been able to retain an upright or even seated position, depending on the injuries received at the time. So essentially he's saying it would have been blindingly obvious to anybody observing Dr. Haffejee following these injuries that he was either in a state of absolute distress and pain, or he was unconscious or drowsy or dead.
My lord, what I can say is that during interrogation, he did not die. He did walk. He was taken to the charge office. I saw that for myself because I was present, and I saw him being put into the cell. He was alive when he was put into the cell.
I've already put to you questions about the certain of the shapes of the injuries on the skin of the lesions. Lord, that's on page 1594, where Dr. Naidu raises the possibility that some of these skin lesions could have been the result of electrodes being applied. Do I understand you correctly? You're saying that no electric shock was administered?
Or should I say, no, not in my presence, because I had gone out and come back for lunch. So possibly during those times, I'm not too certain.
And on the same page, he makes reference to the possibility of instruments being used, such as shackling or restraints. But
No.
your evidence is that no instruments were involved?
No shackles, no chains.
In any event, Dr. Naidu concludes by saying that serious consideration must be given to the possibility of a homicidal slinging of the body, and on that score I think you're agreeing with him.
Sure, my lord. Yes.
And indeed, Dr. Holland reaches the same conclusion, certainly in relation to time of death, roughly the 6 to 12 hours mentioned by Dr. Naidu. And she says that, the longer post-mortem interval, that's the time between the time from death. She says that's not consistent with the explanation given by the police, and thus the manner of death is not consistent with suicide. Now, you mentioned that you attended the inquest into the death of Dr. Haffejee back in 1978.
Yes.
But you were never called to testify.
Yes.
So, firstly, why were you never called to testify? Was there some discussion about that?
No idea, my lord. There was no real discussion as to why I was not called to testify, but I was not called to testify.
And did any superior officer or some legal officer, explain it to you?
No, my lord.
So why do you think you were not called to testify, given you were present at the interrogation?
Probably, maybe under cross-examination, I would say something that is contrary to what Jimmy Taylor had said or what Captain Toy had said, whatever, and they wanted to keep their version as their version. Still being a junior constable at that time, maybe I was not professionally qualified to lead evidence or to say something like the way they wanted it to be said. Those are just, my opinions. It's just my thoughts as what you asked
Did you
for.
make a statement?
Make a statement?
Did you make a statement to anybody at that time?
About?
A written statement?
About?
About Dr. Haffejee, his interrogation, his death?
No, not.
Nobody asked you to make a statement?
I couldn't. I would have been taken out.
No. I'm not suggesting making a statement and telling the truth.
Yes.
I'm suggesting making a statement and giving the version that you were expected to give by Captain Dutoy.
No, because that version was already recorded on cassette. And that was like my version, Shrew had his version, Ben had his version.
But you all made sure that your versions coincided.
Understandably, because although... Okay, so first we go into Captain Taylor's office together, and then we told that there'll be recordings for each one of you, what each one of you must say, and then we had to go out of the office, and then he called each one in individually. And then as he said my version, it's been recorded on audio cassette.
Yes. But at a higher level, a decision was taken that only of the security branch, it would only be Dutoy and Taylor that testifies, and the rest of you would not testify.
No, we were given these cassettes and told to remember everything, go through it over and over again, remember everything, because if you're called to testify, this is what you have to say.
Right.
Yes.
So if you were called to testify, you would have done your duty to the security branch at the time, and you would have stuck to the version you were told to give.
Absolutely. Otherwise, I'll be on death row, so to speak.
But nonetheless, they decided not to take the chance.
Absolutely.
In case maybe you broke under cross-examination or you just made a mistake.
I can agree with you, my lord.
But even though you were not called to testify, and presumably you knew you weren't going to testify, you attended the inquest. Why?
No, I went to the inquest.
Yes, you sat in the gallery and watched.
I sat in the gallery for a while, then I came out, and I sat outside. I went downstairs, I had a smoke, I came up again, sat inside again. So if they called me to testify, I would have gone up. But I was not called to testify.
Surely you knew that you weren't going to be called by them?
No, my lord. I was told that when I'm called to testify, there's my version, and that's what I must say. But they never called me to testify.
Well, yes. No statement was taken from you. No statement was put before the court. And you were never on a witness list?
Absolutely, my lord.
Yes, so there was never any prospect of you testifying?
Well,
and did anybody tell you, look, you better sit there because we might want to call you?
Well, Captain Detroit had indicated very clearly that when you're called to testify, this is what you must say. So I went on my own accord. I mean, nobody told me that you must go and sit in the courtroom. You must listen to this. I walked in and I sat down.
Right. I mean,
Yes.
you didn't have to, but you decided to do it.
I decided to do it. Yes. Yes.
And why? If you didn't have to be there?
To listen to what's going on.
Okay.
Yes.
So I want to put to you an extract from the late Hoosen Haffejee. My Lord, I'm referring to an interview that Hoosen Haffejee gave with one Christian de Vos, who at the time was the University of Durban Westville. He's with the University of Durban Westville Documentation Centre, and they were running an oral history project called Voices of Resistance.
Where do I find it?
And my Lord, that's at volume E, exhibit E12, page 1154.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Gopal, in this interview between Mr. de Vos and Hoosen Haffejee, which is an exhibit before this court, Hoosen Haffejee says that family members were placed under some pressure by the security branch during the first inquest. And he says as follows, and he specifically makes reference to the Indian officers who were present at the inquest. They would try to come near to hear what we were talking about. The Indian security policemen, would come and stand right next to and would pass remarks, I think like, the guy was a terrorist and things like that. I can't particularly remember her face, but I won't be surprised if this Mohan Gopal, who gave me a statement, could have been one of them too. There was a whole group of them. Even security police from Maritzburg were present at the inquest, and subsequently when a friend was talking to them, they said that no, they were just asked to go and observe and to say, who was attending. So even attending an inquest became a hazardous thing. So in that interview, Hoosen Haffejee says that certain Indian security policemen would come out and hang by the family and pass certain remarks. And he speculates that maybe one of those Indian security policemen was you.
My Lord, as far as that allegation is concerned, I certainly did not hang around any of the family members. And if Hoosen Haffejee did say that, with mentioning my name, then that's not true, my Lord. That is not true at all.
You mentioned in your evidence in chief about the case of Griffiths and Victoria Mchenge. And in relation to Griffiths and Mchenge, you spoke about the security branch members who had come down from the Transvaal. And following the murder of Griffiths and Khenge, you were again told to keep quiet.
Yes, my lord.
And in your view, you were told to keep quiet because the security branch had murdered Griffiths and Khenge.
The entire non-white staff were told to keep quiet and do not talk about Griffiths and Khenge.
But in particular, to talk about the fact that Dirk Coetzee, Eugene de Kock and others
Yes,
had been in Durban at that time.
absolutely.
You also mentioned in paragraph 74 that after you had left the force, a colleague by the name of Lieutenant Raju had been killed in an explosion, and you were told that members of Mkhonto Wesizwe had thrown hand grenades into his home and blew him up.
Yes.
Did you believe the story you were told?
That members of Mkhonto Wesizwe,
Threw hand grenades and killed him?
yes, because that was a fact.
Right. So then, why is it that you were then asked to tell his wife that the police wouldn't pay for his funeral?
Well, what had happened there, my lord, was that the following day, Lieutenant Raju had died just after 1 a.m. in the morning. I'm not too certain what day, I'm trying to recall, but the following day, or was it on a Monday, I'm not too certain, but Colonel Van Niekerk had told me to go and inform Lieutenant Raju's wife that the state will not pay for his funeral. And the reason being that he is a temporary member. And I couldn't believe that because at one moment in time, my colleague had died, the family is grieving, and now suddenly the state will not pay for his funeral. Now I had to relay that message to a lady who's already grieving.
Were there any issues between Lieutenant Raju and his superiors?
Not at all, my lord, not at all.
Now, you mentioned in paragraph 75 at page 1754 that you had this intergovernmental transfer to the National Intelligence Service.
Yes.
So how was it that you were transferred from the security branch to the NIS? How did that come about?
Okay, what had happened that after my informing Mrs. Raju that the state will not pay for his funeral, I then decided to leave the branch because it can happen to me as well, and somebody will end up informing my wife that the state will not pay for my funeral, but whites wear the privileged lot and state will pay for their funerals. However, I made an application for an intergovernmental transfer, so it wasn't that I took a discharge from the South African Police. It's an intergovernmental transfer from the South African Police Security Branch to the National Intelligence Service.
And that was from December 87 to September 1991. Well, that's according to your certificate of service with the NIS.
No. On the 1st of October, September.
Well, the dates are not that relevant.
Okay, because...
But if I were to say to you it was between 87 and 91, you would accept that?
92.
Well,
At the end...
I don't know if you have your personal file with you. It's Exhibit Volume J, Exhibit J1. page 2511. It's titled National Intelligence Service, Certificate of Service, and in the middle of the page it says South African Police, rank Speurder Detective. Just get to, you're on page 2511? Yeah.
Sorry, 2511, yes.
So you were in the SAP from 74 to 87.
30th of November, 87.
Exactly.
Oh,
And then in the NIS, you were a senior intelligence officer. And I want, the dates are not important, but
no, the dates are wrong, my lord.
are you saying the dates are wrong? Okay, so
Yes. No, well, 7574 is correct because I was attested on that date as a policeman and left the branch on the 30th of
November 87. Well, in any event, it's
30th,
as I've been
no.
saying over and over again.
Yeah, the dates are not important.
that
Okay,
important.
okay.
You accept that you moved from security branch
Yes.
to National Intelligence Service.
Yes.
And then you were discharged from the NIS according to that document on the 30th of September 1991, but again the date...
No, that date is wrong. I actually left on at the end of February 1992.
Okay, all right. Well, I don't think
You're not
we're
sure?
going to be disputing that.
No? Okay.
And why were you discharged from the National Intelligence Service?
Okay, so at that point in time, the African National Congress were on a disinformation campaign, and my name, amongst other names, was leaked out into the government, into our system, that I am a spy for the African National Congress. And then the counterintelligence unit of National Intelligence, based in Pretoria, they conducted a counter-surveillance program on me for about 2 or 3 months. And I did pick up that information. I could see that I've been tailed. I mean, you don't expect to see a white man sitting in Chatsworth.
Yes.
He sticks out like a sore thumb. But nevertheless, that's what took place. And then eventually they called for me, Pretoria called for me, and then I was taken to the Secret Service Academy in Pretoria, and then started a 2-week polygraph session. I was put under a polygraph because the system really believed that
Yes.
I am an ANC operative.
If I can just interrupt you for a moment, this is a peripheral issue, but if it's going to take too long, then we're going to have to move on because we do wish to finish with you today.
Okay, so my lord, just to quickly answer your question, is that they thought that I was an ANC field operative, and therefore they asked me to dismiss myself in terms of resign. So I opted for that and said, okay, goodbye, because I was absolutely upset with the manner in which the state had treated me.
So they effectively dismissed you, and then is it true that in September of 1992 you applied to be reinstated with the South African Police?
Yes.
And what happened to that application?
That application was turned down.
Do you recall why?
Yes, because I think there is a captain, a colored captain, who was a warrant officer with me in the security branch. But at that point in time, when I had re-enlisted, or tried to re-enlist with the South African Police, the Captain Jacobs, he had put up a statement that I'm not fit to be back in the South African Police services, because during the time that I was with the branch, working with him, he was always opposing. He was always opposing me.
Yes. Well, let me put to you what there appears to be in writing. This is in your personal file. My lord, that's J1, page 2513. It's a letter addressed to Captain Williams from the Commissioner of... it's not clear who it's addressed to, but it seems to be the Commissioner of Police, and it's from the personnel officer of the Durban area. And it says, Boergenaamde, that's yourself, sy aansoek is plaaslik van die hand gewys vir die volgende rede. Hy het nie die toewysingsmodel toets geslaag nie. Hy word nie deur sy vorige bevelvoerder aanbeveel nie. So you failed that test and you weren't recommended by your former commanding officer. And then on top of that, they attached a recommendation prepared by the SAP's Institute for Behavioral Sciences. And my lord, that's at page 2512 of J1.
2512.
2512. It's titled Vertrouwelijk Confidential.
The copy I have is not very clear.
It's not clear, but we managed to decipher
Okay.
that page. Essentially, that institute said the recommendation was that he had not met the basic requirements for either clerical or functional roles within the SAP, and the grounds for opposing his reinstatement were the following. His work output was average to below average. He did not distinguish himself as a very competent field worker. He was reprimanded on numerous occasions by his group head, Lieutenant Colonel Velman, for non-compliance with instructions. On the date of his discharge in 1987, Gopal refused to hand over his informers to other members of the branch, which caused the loss of valuable information. And it's alleged he was not a loyal member to the SAP due to his association with the former member, Major Benjamin, who openly disassociated himself with the SAP and the security branch and was assisting the intelligence unit of the ANC. So what's your response to that, Mr. Gopal?
My lord, that is a whole pack of lies. Because when you compare that with regards to my conduct to the time when Captain Van Sitted, and you did read that letter out, I think, if I speak in the correction, when he had to apply for my salary increase to the second leg of warrant officer, it's the total opposite. That I was loyal to the state, I was everything you can think of. So now that I left the branch and went over to national intelligence, my lord, I've got to state this very clearly. At that point in time, the South African intelligence community did not get on. BOSS could not get on with the security police. BOSS being Bureau of State Security, BOSS, could not get on with the security police. The security police could not get on with DMI, Department of Military Intelligence. Neither with naval intelligence, neither with military intelligence, neither with Air Force intelligence and Department of Foreign Affairs intelligence. Nobody got on eye to eye. And the mere fact that I went over from the security police and that, yes, I had taken over my sources. Well, it's actually the sources belonging to the branch because the branch is paying them, not me. I'm just a handler. But of course, if I go to NI as a fresh member and I produce results as what they want me to produce, I can only do that one way, for me to have access to my sources. So, yes, they were not happy about that. I am aware that the branch was not happy about that.
All right, let's turn to your relationship with SK Govender. You point out in your statement at paragraph 76. I believe that's page 1754 in volume A. You make the point that he assisted you with your amnesty application to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. However, it's clear from your evidence that you have since had a falling out with K.S. Govender, and you've accused him of not charging Taylor and Du Toit when he could have, because he was a former colonel in the police. Why are you accusing him now when he was formally assisting you with your application to the TRC?
Accused me of what?
You accused K.S. Govender of not taking steps to hold Taylor and Du Toit to account.
Yes.
In the 1990s?
Yes. That's true.
Right. Was there some issue between you and K.S. Govender? Did you have some disputes, some fight?
No, my lord. In fact, 1995, we were on talking terms. The fact of the matter is that when the state had provided my attorney with, that's Mr. Ahmed, with the desk of his testimony in this court, and then also available was the statement, his actual statement with regards the Haffejee Inquest that he had submitted. And when I compare that and I look at that, and I see over there everything that he told, that he informed the court about, besides the last paragraph of his affidavit, was not included in his affidavit. He came to court and he gave one version. In his affidavit, he gives another version. And then I also read over there that somebody had placed a gun against his head. And I listened to the recording. There's no gun. So now I'm saying, what? My word, what is going on over here? And this is the reason why we had applied to have him come back and to be re-examined.
Right, okay,
So
that I think is adequate explanation.
Yes.
So you're obviously referring to Mr. Govender's statement before this Honourable Court that he made on 16 August 2021. My Lord, that's Exhibit M3. And in 1977 he sets out that he was detained at Mayville Police Station. In paragraph 8 he does talk about being stripped naked, being heavily assaulted, made to squat, pulled by his hair, his head was pushed into the toilet. He thinks Captain Raju squeezed his private parts. And I believe in one of these paragraphs a gun was placed to his head. I can't quite see it now. Perhaps my junior will tell me where it is. But I want to put the last paragraph to you. So in that same interrogation that he's just described in his statement, K.S. Govender says the following: I also want to point out that whilst they were assaulting me, they kept on saying that they will kill me just like they did to Dr. Haffejee. The Indian members, namely Gopal, VR, and Benjamin, kept on saying, these people will kill you like they did to Haffejee. Tell them the truth, you can't afford to lose your mother, who is a widow. So Govender puts you in that interrogation, present while he was being assaulted, and present while that threat was made against him, that he will die like Dr. Haffejee. What's your response?
Firstly, in that last paragraph where he states over there that my having told him that as well, that is a lie. What I can admit to is that When I saw him at the office, I heard a scream, and I came out from the office and I looked, because his office was, the office where I heard the scream from was like virtually next door to mine. And I looked there, and I saw Colonel Govender stripped naked, and Major Bobby Wellman had a ruler, and he continuously assaulted Colonel Govender on his testicles. That I saw. The minute I saw that, my lord, I turned around and I walked away. I went back into my office. And the reason why I did that, my lord, was that 1 month prior to that, I had seen Dr. Haffejee being brutally assaulted. And I did not want to be reminded of that, and neither do I want to be a witness to Colonel Govender's assault. That's the reason why. The rest of all these other allegations that he makes in court, unfortunately, the other people must account for their actions, etc. But I certainly did not assault him. And I did not tell him that that you must speak the truth, otherwise they will kill you like how they killed Dr. Haffejee. I did not tell him that, my lord. What I do know is that, listening to the disc carefully, is that at one point in time, when he was being interrogated, he was told to speak the truth or we will kill you, just like how we killed Dr. Haffejee. And I remember Mr. McDonald had asked him, we, who is this we? He said, definitely Wellman, Jimmy Taylor, and Detroit. He mentioned those names. So straight away I caught him, but then, hang on, he has information on who killed Dr. Haffejee. So therefore, my lord, I'm saying that in 1995, when he was a policeman, he had the power and authority to make an affidavit, get it registered in a police docket at Sierra SWAT, and then take that docket and go straight to Maritzburg, go straight to the NPA, and then hand the docket in. That's when the NPA will start investigating. But that never ever took place. He never did that. And I do believe he could have taken down a witness statement from me. I would have certainly supplied him a witness statement because we were on talking terms. So I don't hate him for not doing that, but what I'm saying is that in 1995, this matter of the killers of Dr. Haffejee could have started off, and the NPA, he could have gotten two things: one, a receipt from the NPA for the docket, and secondly, an email address of the prosecutor whom he hands the docket in, and then push it by email, continuously push it by email. That's how you expect the NPA to handle that matter further. The NPA can't just start investigating something without any registration of a crime, etc., etc., etc. Doesn't happen. And then you don't blame the NPA for not taking any action, on the other hand, because there wasn't any case handed over to the NPA.
So, Mr. Gopal, I see a bit of a similarity between your evidence on Caius Govender with that of Joseph Mbluli. Again, it seems you are walking by, or perhaps you heard the commotion from somewhere, and again, you're still a young constable.
Yes.
Because you've only been in the branch for a year or so.
Year and a half, 2 years.
And yet you hear a commotion and you go into an office where you're not involved in an interrogation, and you go in to see what's happening.
Yes, certainly. I mean, I hear a scream right next door to my office. So I step out, and I look, because the door was fully open, I step out and I look there. And there I see Major Bobby Wellman assaulting a stripped and naked, fully naked, Colonel Coastal Govender.
Yes, but why were you going into that room when you were not part of that interrogation? I imagine that you already knew that, you operated on a need-to-know basis, and what other officers were doing, surely they wouldn't allow you just to come into a room where you don't belong?
There was no complaint. There was no complaint whatsoever, and none of the officers. Bobby Wellman was there, Jimmy Taylor was there, P.L. Detroit was there, and Mozak Debia was there at that point in time.
Well,
And nobody told me to leave that office. I just stood there, and as soon as I saw the assault taking place, I probably about 2 or 3 or 4 times, the major hit him on his testicles. I then said, whoa, enough is enough. I turned around and I walked back into my office, because that straight away brought back flashes of the grotesque feature of a horrible nightmare that had unfolded before me with regards to Dr. Haffejee. And I just did not want to be part of that witness anymore. What I saw was what I saw, and that's it. And that's the reason why I turned back and went back to my office.
Yes, well, as I put it to you in relation to Joseph and Gluli, I just find it improbable that as a young Indian constable, you're able to walk into offices where you're supposedly not even part of that interrogation,
Yes.
to see what is going on. But let's move on. My Lord, during the lunch period, we were furnished with an additional statement made by K.S. Govender.
Yeah.
My Lord, we had asked Captain Mbele, one of the investigating officers, to approach K.S. Govender about the allegations in relation to the payment of money for information as set out in the notes that we referred to yesterday. And
So this case, Kevin, is that the same one you are talking about?
it's the very same K.S. Govender, my Lord.
With the one who has testified?
Yes, my Lord. He did testify. My Lord, I don't want to take up too much time dealing with this statement, but the bottom line is that Mr. Govender is saying that he did not take those notes in which that allegation was made.
Oh, I see. Are you talking about this exhibit L?
Exactly. I can't recall the exact
Yeah, the
exhibit
information
number.
supplied and so on.
My team will tell me what that exhibit number is.
It's exhibit L.
Well, it's L. It would have been perhaps L1 or.
Okay.
But it was also part of Volume G because it came straight after
Yeah.
a handwritten affidavit by Yusuf Haffejee himself. Indeed, it was L1. The notes were also found by Sarah Haffejee, and she provided them to us, and we put it up again as L1.
Yeah.
So, my Lord, we will be submitting that the notes were most likely taken by Yusuf Haffejee.
Himself.
Indeed. My Lord, perhaps though, to be fair to this witness, we should put the statement made by Mr. Govender to him. My Lord, if we may hand it up as exhibit marked L18. No, sorry. I think the original should go to the judge, and a copy should go to Mr. Gopal. So the original to the judge, copy to Mr. Gopal.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Gopal, as you can see, this statement was taken just this morning by Captain Mbele. And in second paragraph, under paragraph 1, he says he's aware that we had a meeting at Chatsworth involving himself, yourself, and Yusuf Haffejee. He says he thinks it was at a car park, and the importance of this meeting was for Gopal to apologize to the Haffejee family for what had happened to him. In paragraph 2, he says he initiated this meeting when already having been approached by Gopal for an apology also on myself for the treatment and assaults I suffered from the hands of Gopal and his colleagues at the Special Branch. And perhaps let's just pause there. As you can see, he's repeating what he said in his other statement, and he goes further and says that that Governor initiated this meeting when he was approached by you because you were offering an apology to him for the assaults he had received at the hands of the branch, including yourself. Did you approach him and apologize to him?
No, my lord, that is a lie.
He then says Gopal had informed Haffejee how the assaults took place on Dr. Haffejee and what the Special Branch had done to his brother. In the next paragraph he says, I cannot remember how Yusuf responded. I also want to point out that I had a few meetings with Gopal. At this stage, Gopal was not employed. He asked me to find him a job and gave me his CV. I approached the Revenue Service. Ivan Pillay, who was then Deputy Commissioner, and someone in the police service, but both these institutions rejected him. Your response to that?
Okay, the part where I cannot remember how Yusuf responded at the time because he was a very cool person. I also want to point out that I also had a few meetings with Mr. Gopal, and at this stage Gopal was not employed. Yes, I did give him a CV. I did give Coastal Government a CV, and that I did meet Ivan Pillay. That's correct. Ivan Pillay at that point in time had, like when the amalgamation took place between ANC Department of Intelligence and Security Branch, Ivan Pillay was not only attached to SARS, but he was also attached to the South African Police in Pretoria, Crime Intelligence. Both institutions rejected me. I know I had asked him for SAP employment to get me back to the SAP, but SARS, no. But he says that both institutions rejected me, right? I have no qualms with that. Where I have an objection is where he says in the second paragraph of paragraph 1, where he says, I'm aware that we had a meeting at Chatsworth, though I think it was at the car park. The importance of this meeting was for Gopal to apologize to the Haffejee family and for what had happened to Dr. Haffejee whilst in police custody, where he died later. My lord, Coastal Governor was never ever present at that meeting. Who was present was the late Mr. Yusuf Haffejee and his advocate, Advocate Hoosen Mal. He came along with, there were two of them. Coastal Governor is speaking a lie in this paragraph. And then where he says, I initiated this meeting, he was never there. So how could I initiate this meeting? That is a lie, my lord. And then on paragraph 4, he says, I had been prepared to assist him in finding a job because I was hoping he will ultimately assist in revealing the atrocities of the past, nationalist government. It is also important that it be noted that there may have been meetings between Gopal and Yusuf Haffejee without me. There was only one meeting between Mr. Yusuf Haffejee, myself, and that was in the presence of Advocate Hoosen Mal. Only one. And Advocate Hoosen Mal I understand he's now late. But if there's an affidavit in the system that you have, sir, by all means. And then, of course, he says, I, however, did not engage to any form of remuneration. Now, he's talking about himself. I, however, did not engage to any form of remuneration or been aware of any other person who might have attempted to do the same in seeking and to get him assisting on what, so English not right here.
Yes.
Have attempted to do the same in seeking to get him assisting on what we required, which was the atrocities of the past. Now,
Yes.
my Lord, this meeting between Hoosen Haffejee and Advocate Hoosen Mal took place after my TRC meeting, because Coastal Governor had told me that he had given a copy of my TRC affidavit to Yusuf, and now I believe that Yusuf, being armed with that, now wants to talk to me, and I had no problem with that. Coastal Governor had phoned me at my home. I told Coastal, sure, go ahead, make an arrangement, not a problem. And that's when I got a call from Mr. Hoosen Haffejee that he'll be at, well, I recommended Chatsworth Center, because you can go to a coffee shop there, and he had met me there with Advocate Hoosen Mal, who had quite a thick file with him. And then we sat at a coffee shop there, and he had shown me photographs of the late Dr. Haffejee, and he asked me, did you see these photographs? I reckon, yes. I did see these photographs, because I had seen them in late Dr. Haffejee's security police file at Corson House.
Well, of course, Mr. Gopal, just because you had made out your TRC statement and you had it with, it doesn't mean that you had necessarily already been before the TRC and had your application decided.
My Lord, I met Hoosen Haffejee because he had already received a copy of my TRC affidavit from Coastal Governor. So which means I've already been to the TRC.
When you say been to the TRC, you mean to drop off your application?
No, not to drop off my application, for the TRC. Colonel Governor took me to the TRC. Both of us walked in together. He introduced me to Advocate Governor, the head of the TRC. And then he said, okay, this is Mr. Gopal, and he's going to give you a statement with regards to Dr. Haffejee. And the whole day, Advocate Governor took down my affidavit, signed off in the afternoon.
Yes.
And then Colonel Governor came and he picked me up and then took me home. Of course, by then, before he left there, Advocate Governor had given him a copy of my amnesty application and said, fill this in there, and Superintendent Governor will sign off on that.
Yes,
so because it was late in the afternoon, he took me home. He picked me up some time.
Yes, and we hear you.
Yes.
But really what you're saying is you spent that day lodging your application and giving your statement to the TRC. And then typically what happens after you've lodged an application...
No, I did not lodge my application. My Lord, my amnesty application was only signed off on the 10th of May, 1997. And it was only handed in on the 14th of May, 1997. So Coastal Governor signed off as he commissioned.
Yes. But the procedure at the TRC was you make your application, then the TRC processes the application, and they make a decision.
Yes.
They might make it on the application itself. They will decide, we reject this application because he or she doesn't meet certain requirements or criteria under the Act.
True.
And then it's simply rejected.
Okay.
And then you will get the letter in which the rejection is set out.
Like in my case.
Like in your case.
Yes.
Alternatively, if they wish to take the matter further, then the matter will be investigated further. A hearing will be arranged.
Yes.
The applicant will appear,
Yes.
witnesses will be led,
Yes.
and then a decision made down the road. So that's what I'm saying. What happened
Oh,
to
sure.
you was the making of your application,
Okay.
and then later you received the rejection letter.
Yes.
Right. And of course, at that point in time, when you made the application, you didn't know whether you'd be in a hearing or whether you get a letter. That information would only become clear to you at a later stage.
Advocate Govender had told me that, Mr. Gopal, you are a witness. You did not commit any acts of atrocities. You did not kill anyone. You did not do any shootings or stabbings or whatever. You are just a witness. So, as a means of formality, make an application. It will be turned down, but then you know it's placed on record, and that's it. So don't get worried about it being turned down. So there we go. So I made my application.
Well, that's pretty interesting. So you're saying that you were told up front that because you were a witness, Advocate Govender, Satya Govender said to you, you'd done nothing wrong because you were just a witness?
Yes.
Well then, why were you applying for amnesty then?
That's what I've just said. That's what I've just said now, my Lord.
but, you know,
I say very clearly, and I'm going to repeat myself, my Lord.
But presumably you thought that you had committed a crime, because why else would you apply for amnesty?
I went there to make a statement to the TRC, right? Amnesty wasn't the issue at hand. The issue at hand was my making a full confession to the TRC with regards to the Haffejee investigation. Then, towards the end of my application, at the end of my affidavit, Advocate Govender told me, Mr. Gopal, there's no need for you to make an application for amnesty because you're only a witness. You only saw what took place. However, for purposes of formality, make an application. It will be turned down, but it's not for you to worry about. That's when a coastal governor had come to pick me up, and he gave a copy, a blank copy, 2 or 3 pages, whatever. It said, fill this in, and then Superintendent Governor will sign this off and deliver it to me. And then off we went.
Well, I just have to say that I have difficulty in accepting that version, that a senior legal officer at the TRC knows that you have committed no offence, but tells you to apply for amnesty anyway, knowing that you'll be denied amnesty.
Yes.
That is just, frankly, highly improbable.
Well, that's what took place, my Lord. I'm not speaking a lie.
And if I can just point you to your rejection letter from the TRC, my Lord, that's G26, at page 1774. The reason for the rejection is the first box. And the first box says, the offence in regard to which amnesty is sought does not relate to an act associated with a political objective. It's not the second box, which you would have thought would have been ticked in your case. Guilt is denied. Because if you never committed a crime or an offence, then that's the box that should have been ticked, not the first box, that it wasn't a crime, it wasn't a politically motivated crime.
But I didn't fill in that.
I know you didn't fill in that,
Yes.
but this is the decision
Yes.
made, presumably,
Yes.
by the amnesty committee.
Yes.
And after considering what was in your statement,
Yes.
they're saying it is a crime, but it wasn't politically motivated, therefore you reject it.
Okay. Sure.
So what you're saying about Satya Govender saying, well, apply anyway, but you've committed no crime.
Yes.
If that was the case, then that second box would have been ticked because you had no, you were not guilty of any crime.
I don't contest what you are saying, my Lord, but this is what transpired.
So are you saying that the TRC just got it wrong here when they ticked the wrong box? Is that what you're saying?
If that's what is, if that's the way you want to put it to the court.
No, I don't know what to put to the court in this regard. But if I accept on the face of it, then the amnesty committee is saying, you did commit a crime, you are responsible for a crime, but the crime in question is not politically motivated.
So I committed a crime by looking at what transpired. Is that what?
Well, if you were present on the scene where somebody was tortured and then subsequently died, that does implicate you.
Well, my lord, there is the results that I've received. Those results were given to me by Advocate Shabnam Singh. It's the first time that I had seen it when it was sent over to me. That was from 2017, middle of 2017, I guess, when I received those results.
Well, Lord, I see we're approaching 4 p.m. I had hoped to finish with this witness today. I will probably only require about 30 minutes in the morning. So if the court is so inclined, perhaps we can take the adjournment and then finish with the witness first thing tomorrow.
Okay.
And then deal with Constable Nordia and Brigadier Mario.
Okay, then we'll attend the hearing until tomorrow morning, okay? Over.
Yes, sir.
Court is adjourned.
All right.